There is a strange type of man growing on the internet. A man who has already mentally checked out of life before it has even begun. He scrolls through forums at 3 in the morning reading about societal collapse, failed relationships, economic decline, loneliness, and the death of meaning. He speaks in irony because sincerity feels embarrassing. He laughs at his own suffering before anyone else can. He calls himself blackpilled, a doomer, a NEET, a loser, subhuman, cooked. And the strangest part is that he does not even seem angry anymore. Just tired. Because somewhere along the way, many men stopped believing that life was something they could meaningfully participate in, and started believing it was simply something to survive. But doomers are not born out of nowhere. They are created, and the internet may have perfected the process. There used to be a very simple idea sold to young men. Work hard, get a job, find a wife, buy a house, build a life. Whether or not that dream was ever fully real does not even matter anymore, because the important thing was that people believed in it. Now compare that to modern experience. A young man graduates into an economy he barely understands. Housing feels unreachable. Wages stagnate while prices climb. Relationships become increasingly digitized and transactional. Communities disappear. Third places vanish. Religion weakens. Families fragment. And suddenly, the future stops looking like a destination and starts looking like a wall. A lot of men today are not necessarily suffering from physical starvation. They are suffering from existential stagnation. They feel stuck. Not poor enough to collapse, not successful enough to thrive, not hopeless enough to give up, but not hopeful enough to try. And that psychological limbo is where doomers are born. The internet was supposed to connect people. Instead, for many men, it became a digital cave, a place to retreat from humiliation, rejection, boredom, loneliness, and uncertainty. And in this cave are communities built entirely around shared pessimism, doomposting, blackpill forums, schizoposting, conspiracy threads, NEET communities, late-night anonymous image boards, old bodybuilding forums with men slowly losing faith in life while pretending everything is a joke. Places where suffering becomes culture. The problem is not that these spaces discuss painful truths. Sometimes they do. The problem is what happens when people stop using these communities to vent and start using them to construct their entire worldview. Because once pessimism becomes identity, escape starts to feel like betrayal. A man who improves himself threatens the group narrative. A man who finds happiness becomes cringe, naive, blue-pilled. And eventually, irony transforms into genuine belief. The memes stop being jokes. A lot of doomers are not actually pessimists at their core. They are disappointed optimists. People who wanted meaning so badly that they eventually convinced themselves meaning does not exist at all. Because nihilism can protect the ego. If nothing matters, then failure does not matter. If love is fake, rejection cannot hurt you. If society is doomed, then your lack of success becomes understandable. If everything is rigged, then trying becomes pointless. This is why blackpill ideology is psychologically seductive. It transforms uncertainty into certainty. Even if that certainty is miserable, at least it explains things. And human beings would often rather have a painful explanation than no explanation at all. That is why doomers obsess over patterns, statistics, social hierarchies, and deterministic thinking, not because it makes them happy, but because it gives shape to suffering. There is also something specifically male about this phenomenon. Men are often valued based on performance. Status, competence, confidence, income, social ability, strength. When men fail socially or economically, many do not merely feel unsuccessful, they feel invisible. And modern life creates an enormous number of invisible men. Men who drift through school, work, and online spaces without feeling desired, respected, needed, or remembered. Previous generations at least had stronger community structures forcing interaction. Churches, local organizations, neighborhoods, clubs, family expectations. Now many men spend years almost entirely alone outside of work or school while consuming endless amounts of other people's lives online. And isolation distorts perception. A lonely mind becomes vulnerable to extremism, paranoia, obsession, and resentment because there are fewer real-world experiences available to challenge those beliefs. The internet then amplifies the distortion. Algorithms quickly learn that outrage, pessimism, fear, and conflict are engaging, so the doomer is fed more doom, until eventually his entire reality begins to resemble an endless confirmation loop. One of the darkest realizations about doomer culture is that hopelessness can become comforting, because hope requires vulnerability. Hope means risking humiliation, trying again, believing things can improve, facing uncertainty. Hopelessness removes responsibility. If the world is doomed anyway, then there is no pressure to change yourself, no pressure to improve, no pressure to connect, no pressure to fail. That is why some people become emotionally attached to pessimism. It simplifies life. And the internet rewards this mindset because cynical people are highly online people. They consume endlessly because consumption requires participation. Instead of living life, they analyze it from the outside like spectators watching a collapsing civilization through a screen. The tragedy is that many doomers are not unintelligent. In fact, many are extremely observant. They notice contradictions, hypocrisy, economic instability, loneliness, social fragmentation, artificiality. But observation without grounding becomes poison. A person can become so obsessed with diagnosing the sickness of the world that they forget they are still living inside it. And eventually they stop building anything altogether. No friendships, no ambitions, no relationships, no future. Only analysis, only irony, only doom. The doomer convinces himself he sees reality more clearly than everyone else, while slowly becoming incapable of participating in reality at all. And that may be the greatest trap the internet ever created. Maybe the reason so many men become doomers is because modern life has created millions of isolated people searching for meaning in a world that increasingly feels artificial. But human beings were not designed to live entirely inside abstractions, not inside algorithms, not inside statistics, not inside conspiracy threads, not inside endless irony. A man cannot think himself into a meaningful life. At some point he has to participate in one. And maybe that is the real black pill nobody wants to hear. The internet can explain your suffering forever, but it cannot live your life for you.